the frozen winter of 1886, deep in Wyoming's remote Broken Bow Valley, 4 battle-scarred Comanche warriors faced their final threat, losing the last sliver of ancestral land to banks and laws that never favored the conquered. Desperate to prove they could build civilized families, they sent letters east for brides, strangers who might save them. That same winter, 4 sisters fled Boston's gilded cages, escaping a powerful man whose protection hid deadly control after their father's mysterious death exposed his secrets. When the train finally broke through the blizzard, delivering the women to the waiting warriors, ancient distrust met raw fear in a single glance. Could these 8 shattered souls, hunted by the same greed that stole land and freedom, forge something unbreakable? This story ends in a moment so powerful that it's left millions in tears. Stay with me to the end. You'll see why. Hit subscribe right now, comment where you're watching from, and share this if you believe in second chances born from courage. Let's dive in. Snow stung their faces like blown glass as the 4 Comanche warriors waited on the frozen platform of Broken Bow Valley Station. January 1886 had buried Wyoming under a white silence, broken only by the distant howl of wind across the plains. Tahan Redhawk, the eldest, stood motionless, his breath clouding in front of eyes that had seen too many defeats. Beside him, Kill's Crow shifted his weight, restless as always, while Quiet Elk stared at the tracks disappearing into the storm. Young Bear, barely 20 winters, gripped the reins of their horses tighter than necessary. They had come for brides, not for love. Love was a luxury the conquered could not afford. The land grant that kept them from reservation chains was slipping away. Bank letters, county notices, white men's laws that measured worth by plows and wives and children. 4 warriors without families were 4 problems easily removed. So they had done the unthinkable. Sent money east to a marriage broker, asked for women willing to live hard and ask few questions. The train was late. Snow piled on their hat brims and the backs of their blanket coats. Somewhere down the line, iron wheels fought ice. Then they heard it, a low rumble growing into a roar. Headlamp light cut through the blizzard like a blade. The engine blasted steam and shrieked to a stop, iron brakes screaming against the cold. Snow swirled around the cars as doors banged open. 4 women stepped down. They moved as one, coats pulled tight, faces half hidden by scarves. The first to reach the platform shook snow from her boots and looked straight at Tahan. Dark hair escaped her hood. Her eyes held no wonder, only calculation. Margaret Hale. The letter had described her as capable, 25, no nonsense. She matched the words. Behind her came Clara, taller, shoulders squared like a man ready for trouble. Then Beatrice, smaller, clutching a leather satchel as if it held her life. Last, Eliza, the youngest, cheeks flushed from cold, but eyes bright with something close to defiance. Margaret stepped forward. The wind snatched at her words, but she spoke clearly enough. We are sisters, all 4 of us. Tahan felt the others stiffen beside him. 4 separate advertisements, 4 separate payments, 1 train, 1 arrival. Margaret did not wait for questions. We saw the listings for 4 men on the same grant. We answered together. The broker made a mistake, or we made him think it was 1. Either way, we are here, together. We do not separate. Her voice carried the clipped edge of Boston streets, but underneath ran something raw, hunted. Kill's Crow gave a short laugh that held no humor. You ran from something. Margaret met his gaze. We ran towards something. Survival. Quiet Elk spoke for the first time, voice low. You bring trouble to this land? Trouble is already here, Margaret answered. It wears suits and carries papers, same as yours. Snow kept falling, thick and relentless. The train whistle blew again, impatient. Porters tossed down 4 small trunks and a single carpet bag. That was all they owned. Young Bear looked at Eliza. She looked back without flinching. Something passed between them. Recognition of youth caught in adult wars. Tahan weighed choices the way he once weighed enemy strength. Leave them here, and they froze by morning. Take them back, and risk whatever hunted them. The storm decided for him. He turned to the horses. Mount up. Trail's long and the wind's rising. Margaret nodded once. No gratitude, no pleading. The sisters gathered their bags. Clara lifted a trunk as easily as any man. Beatrice whispered something to Eliza that made the girl straighten her shoulders. They rode out single file, Tahan leading, Margaret behind him on the same horse, because there were not enough saddles for 8. Her body was warm against his back, rigid with distrust. Snow erased their tracks almost as fast as hooves made them. Behind them, the train pulled away, bell clanging into the white void. Ahead lay the camp, hide lodges and 1 log cabin beside a half-frozen creek. Ahead lay nights of shared fire and shared silence. Ahead lay whatever the women fled and whatever the men defended. Neither side spoke again until the lights of the camp flickered through the storm. Only then did Kill's crow break the quiet, voice carrying back over the wind. Welcome to what's left of our world, ladies. Hope you're ready for winter. The camp emerged from the storm like a half-remembered dream. 3 hide lodges flanking a squat log cabin, smoke struggling upward from the chimney before the wind slapped it flat. Horses stamped in the corral, breath steaming. A thin dog barked once and fell silent. Tahan dismounted first, boots crunching through crusted snow. Margaret slid down behind him without a word. The others followed, snow shedding from coats and hats. No one offered help with the trunks. The women carried their own. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with pine smoke and the sharp tang of tanned hides. A single iron stove glowed red in the center. Quiet Elk fed at split cottonwood while Kill's crow hung rifles on pegs. Young Bear fetched water from the creek, axe breaking ice with sharp cracks. The sisters stood just inside the door, snow melting off their boots onto the packed dirt floor. Eyes took inventory. Bunks along one wall, a rough table, shelves of tin plates and coffee pots. No curtains, no softness. Margaret broke the silence. We work for our keep. Point us where you need hands. Tahan studied her for a long moment. Dawn comes early. Horses need grain. Wood needs splitting. Clara nodded. We've split wood before. Night fell hard. Outside, wind moaned around the eaves. Inside, 8 people moved in careful orbits, avoiding touch, avoiding questions. Supper was venison stew and hard bread. The women ate what was set before them, no complaints. The conversation stayed on weather and chores. Days blurred into a tense rhythm. Clara rose before light, out in the corral with Kill's crow, learning to handle half-wild ponies with quick hands and sharper words. Arguments flared fast, over rope knots, over feed portions, then died just as quickly, leaving both breathing hard and oddly alert. Beatrice found Quiet Elk's small cache of books, worn volumes on law, history, and a battered Shakespeare. She sat by the stove, tracing lines with a finger, mouthing words. He watched from across the room, saying nothing. But the next evening, a new log was placed beside her without comment. Eliza trailed young Bear on his trap lines, asking questions that made him laugh despite himself. She learned to read snow tracks, to set snares. Her hands blistered, then toughened. Margaret worked beside Tahan, hauling water, mending harness, butchering a deer with steady cuts. They spoke little, but when they did, words carried weight. One afternoon, splitting kindling, she asked, How long before the bank takes this place? Spring, he answered, axe biting deep. Unless we prove roots. She paused, breath white in the cold. Roots can be planted late and still grow. He met her eyes. Something flickered there, recognition of shared stubbornness. Nights were harder. The women shared one lodge. Thin hide walls let every sound through. Clara woke once, gasping from a dream, fist clenched. Margaret's low voice soothed her back to sleep. Another night, Eliza whimpered about chains and locked doors. Beatrice hummed an old tune until the girl quieted. The men heard it all. Kill's crow rolled over, muttering about ghosts. Quiet Elk stared at the lodge poles until dawn. Young Bear punched his blanket roll, angry at shadows he couldn't fight. One evening, Margaret sat sharpening a skinning knife by firelight. Tahan entered, snow on his shoulders. She spoke without looking up. Our father wrote about railroad fraud. Land grants were stolen from tribes, from settlers alike. He got too close. Fell downstairs one night. Broken neck. Her voice was flat iron. Victor Langford, Boston money, railroad money, offered to care for us afterward. Care meant ownership. Tahan fed the stove, sparks rising. Langford's name is on some of the bank papers here. Margaret's knife stilled. Then he's coming for more than us. Outside, a rider approached through deepening dusk, hooves muffled by snow, lantern swinging. The dog barked fiercely. Kill's crow stepped out, rifle ready. The man wore a heavy buffalo coat, badge pinned outside. County messenger. He handed over a sealed envelope addressed to Tahan Redhawk. Inside, official notice from the bank. Land to be inspected for productive use and stable family occupancy before the spring thaw. Failure meant forfeiture. At the bottom, a second sheet. Telegraph flimsy. Rumor of 4 Boston women reported missing. Federal marshal en route to investigate possible abduction by hostile Indians. Tahan read it twice. The fire popped. 8 faces turned toward him in the shifting light. Margaret spoke first. Trouble just caught up. Kill's crow chambered around. Let it come. The wind rose, rattling the lodge poles like warning bones. The wind kept rattling the lodge poles that night, but dawn brought a hard, bright cold that locked the snow in place. Work waited for no one. Tahan saddled the strongest horse and rode out alone to check the far traps, needing distance from the new weight in camp. When he returned at midday, he found Margaret had already reorganized the grain bins, stacking sacks higher and tighter than before. She wiped sweat from her brow with a sleeve, leaving a streak of dust. Wasting space before, she said by way of explanation. He grunted approval and moved on. Clara and Kill's crow brought in 3 wild mustangs they'd roped on the open flats. The animals bucked and screamed in the corral, eyes rolling white. Clara vaulted the fence without hesitation, rope in hand, matching Kill's crow move for move. Dust and snow flew. When the last horse stood blowing hard but subdued, Clara laughed once. Short, surprised, real. Kill's crow stared at her a beat longer than necessary. Beatrice spent mornings with Quiet Elk, mending harness by the stove. She asked about the old raids, the treaties broken like dry twigs. He answered in short sentences at first, then longer. One afternoon, she pulled the leather-bound notebook from her satchel, her father's, yellowed pages filled with dates, names, land parcels, and railroad payments. Langford's signature is on half these, she said quietly. Quiet Elk traced a line with one finger. Same man who signs our bank notices. Eliza proved quick with a skinning knife. Young Bear showed her how to quarter a deer clean and fast. Blood steamed in the cold air. She didn't flinch. Afterward, they sat on a log, sharpening blades, breath mingling. You ever miss Boston? He asked. Only the library, she said. And even that had bars on the windows. Weeks ground on, the woman's hands roughened, cheeks wind-burned. The men's guarded glances softened at the edges. Shared meals grew longer. Someone always added wood to the stove before another ran out. One night, the temperature dropped cruel enough to crack trees. The 8 of them crowded the cabin instead of splitting between lodges. Coffee boiled black and strong. Stories came out in pieces. Kill's crow told of the last fight on the Staked Plains, how the bluecoats came at dawn with Gatling guns. Clara listened, eyes steady, then told of watching her father carried home on a door after the accident. Same cold rage in both voices. Quiet Elk spoke of reservation schools where children's hair was cut and names erased. Beatrice answered with the charity balls where Langford paraded the Hale sisters like prizes, whispering threats behind smiles. Margaret and Tahan said the least, but their silences matched. Outside, a wolf howled long and mournfully. Inside, the stove roared. Later, when embers glowed low, Margaret spoke to the room. "If that marshal comes, he'll want papers. Langford has judges in his pocket back east." Tahan stared into the fire. "We have rifles. And lose everything the moment you fire one," she shot back. "We need something he can't buy." Beatrice lifted the notebook. This might be it, but it's incomplete. Father died before he finished. Quiet Elk leaned forward. "Then we finish it." The plan formed fast. Ride to the county seat, search old land records, match names and dates. Risky. Federal eyes already watched. Before dawn the next day, a rider thundered into camp. Same county messenger, face blue with cold. He thrust a new envelope at Tahan. Inside, a federal warrant. Marshal Harlan is arriving within the week to escort 4 missing Boston women to safety. Attached was Langford's sworn statement, claiming guardianship and abduction by savages. At the bottom, a bank addendum. Land inspection moved forward. Forfeiture if no legal families by the first thaw. Tahan crushed the paper in his fist. Margaret stood beside him, voice low. "He's forcing the fight now." Kill's crow checked his Winchester. Quiet Elk's jaw tightened. Young Bear looked suddenly older. Clara spoke for all of them. "Then we don't run. If you're feeling the weight of this moment with me, these 8 people backed against the same wall, do me a favor and hit that subscribe button. Means a lot. Keep stories like this alive. Now, let's see how far they're willing to go." Snow began to fall again, thick and deliberate, as if the sky itself prepared to bury evidence or witness what came next. Snow thickened overnight, turning the valley into a white grave. By morning, fresh tracks from a single rider cut straight to the camp gate. Deep, deliberate, made by shod horses pulling weight. Victor Langford had arrived ahead of schedule. He dismounted from a polished black sleigh drawn by matched bays, greatcoat collar turned up, gold watch chain catching what little light broke through the clouds. 2 hard-faced men rode escort, Winchesters across their pommels. The county sheriff trailed behind, hat brim low, looking like a man collecting a debt he didn't want. Tahan walked out to meet them alone, coat open despite the bite. The rest stayed shadowed in the doorway, silent. Langford offered a thin smile. "Red Hawk, I believe you're harboring property that belongs to me. Name it." 4 young women under my lawful guardianship, reported missing under suspicious circumstances. He produced a thick fold of papers, wax seals gleaming. "Federal authority attached. I've come to take them home." Margaret stepped forward, sisters tight at her flanks. "We have no home with you." Langford's gaze slid over her like a branding iron. "Distress speaks loudly in the young. I'm here to quiet it." The sheriff shifted in his saddle. "Hearings set for tomorrow in town. Judge Harlan presiding. Land office inspector will be there too. Bank wants its accounting. Tahan's voice stayed level. "We'll ride in." Langford touched his hat brim. Wise choice. That night, the camp shrank around them. Quiet elk pushed for flight. Head north, lose themselves in the wind rivers before spring pursuit. Kill's Crow argued for cutting the trail at the narrow pass, one clean ambush. Young Bear paced the corral until the horses shied from his anger. Margaret ended it. "Bullets or running boots, we still lose. Courtroom's the only place paper fights paper on even terms." They rode into the settlement at first light, 8 riders in single file, horses blowing steam. The town crouched under heavy snow, false front stores, hitching rails sagging, the courthouse a raw pine box with a stovepipe belching smoke. Inside, benches groaned under ranchers, merchants, and drifters. Coal lamps hissed. Federal Marshal Harlan, black robe over his badge, banged gavel on scarred pine. Langford went first, papers stacked like poker chips. Guardianship decrees signed within days of the father's fatal fall. Sworn statements from Boston clergy and bankers attesting the sisters' hysteria. Overdue notices on the Comanche grant, citing lack of improvement and absence of recognized families. The land agent testified to barren fields, untaxed acres. The sheriff repeated the town gossip of coercion and savage influence. Tahan rose when called. "These women arrived by public train, of their own will. They share our labor, our fire, our risk. That is family." Harlan's eyes were winter steel. "Sentiment doesn't satisfy statute, sir." Margaret stood without leave. "Then satisfy this." She placed her father's notebook on the bar. Dates, signatures, payments, land stolen from tribes and homesteaders alike. Victor Langford's hand on every page. Langford gave a soft chuckle. The scribblings of a disappointed drunk. No witnesses, no corroboration. Harlan barely glanced. Inadmissible without foundation. Beatrice tried next. "We can name clerks, surveyors." "None here," the judge cut in. Clara's voice rang clear. "Then charge us as runaways, but you will not load us onto that man's sleigh like freight." Langford leaned forward. "They remain wards until 5 and 20. The law is explicit." The gavel cracked like a rifle shot. Custody reverted to Plaintiff Langford, effective now. Land grant declared forfeit. Auction scheduled first thaw. Defendants will surrender the women without resistance. Court adjourned. Young Bear surged up. "You can't." Deputies seized him. Irons snapped. He twisted hard, elbow catching one in the mouth, blood bright against snow when they hauled him through the side door to the jail lean-to. The room emptied fast. Outside, sleet slashed sideways. Langford's hired men formed a cordon. The sisters were marched toward the waiting sleigh. Margaret's gaze found Tahan across the muddy street, fierce, promising something unspoken. Bells jingled as the sleigh pulled out, runners hissing over frozen ruts, taking the women east toward the railroad and whatever waited beyond. Tahan stood rooted in the street, sleet crusting his braids, watching red tail lights fade into the storm. In one morning, the last pieces of their world had been stripped away. Hooves pounded the frozen road behind the sleigh, but the sound was wrong, too fast, too urgent. A lone rider burst from the tree line, coat flapping like a war banner. Marshal Harlan himself, face raw from the wind, waving a yellow telegraph flimsy overhead. "Hold up!" His shout cracked across the flats. Langford's driver hauled the reins. The bays slid to a stop, sleigh runners scraping ice. Harlan swung down, boots punching through crust. New wire from Washington. Investigation reopened on Victor Langford's land dealings. All proceedings stayed pending review. Langford leaned out, color draining beneath his fur collar. On what authority? Harlan thrust the paper forward. Federal judge in Cheyenne. Evidence submitted overnight. Ledger matching railroad fraud claims. Orders immediate halt to custody transfer and land forfeiture. Margaret's hand found Clara's in the sleigh. Beatrice's eyes widened. Eliza drew a sharp breath. Langford snatched the flimsy, scanned it, lips thinning. Fabricated nonsense. I'll have this overturned by— You'll have it overturned in court, Harlan cut in. Not here. Turn the sleigh around. The hired guns exchanged glances, hands drifting from rifle stocks. The sheriff, trailing the marshal, suddenly found interest in the horizon. Langford's voice dropped to a hiss. You're making a mistake, Marshal. Already made one believing your story, Harlan replied. Won't make another. The sleigh reversed toward town, runners groaning. Townspeople gathered on porches as words spread like powder flash. First a murmur, then open stares. Ranchers who'd lost acres to railroad surveys. Homesteaders burned out by grazing leases. Even the banker stepped outside, ledger forgotten. Back in the courthouse, cleared now except for the principals, Beatrice laid the notebook on the judge's bench. Pages flipped under Harlan's gloved finger. Dates aligning with county records. Signatures matching those on the Comanche grant foreclosure. Names of surveyors willing to talk if protected. Payments traced to Langford's Boston accounts. Harlan looked up slowly. This is dynamite, Miss Hale. It's true, she said. Tahan, Kills Crow, and Quiet Elk pushed through the doors, snow on their shoulders. Young Bear followed, wrists raw from irons, freed on Harlan's order the moment the wire arrived. Langford stood alone now. Escorts paid only for easy work. He tried bluster one last time. These are wards of the state. Savages have no standing enough to keep what's theirs until proven otherwise, Harlan said. And you, sir, are under federal inquiry. I suggest you remain available. The room fell quiet. Outside, the wind shifted south. Warm Chinook gusts began eating at the snowpack, water trickling in sudden runnels along the street. Langford mounted his horse without the sleigh, coat flapping as he spurred east alone. No one watched him go. Days later, the thaw came hard. Snow slumped from roofs in heavy slabs. Creeks roared bank full. Grass showed green along the south slopes. The camp changed with the weather. Horses rolled in mud, kicking heels high. The women moved their few belongings into the log cabin permanently. No more separate lodges. Coffee boiled stronger. Laughter came easier. One evening, Tahan found Margaret beside the creek, watching new water carve channels through old ice. He stood silent until she spoke. Langford's finished. Telegrams say indictment's coming. He nodded. Land office sent new papers. Grant extended. Families recognized. She turned to him. Because of us? Because we stood, he said. The quiet stretched, broken only by the water noise. Finally, he asked, voice low. What do you want now, Margaret Hale? She studied the rushing creek, then his face. I want to stay. Not because I must, because I choose. One by one, the others answered the same question in their own moments. Clara to Kills Crow after breaking a fresh colt. I choose this fight, and you with it. Beatrice to Quiet Elk under starlight thick as spilled salt. I choose these nights, these words, this quiet. Eliza to Young Bear on a ridge greening fast. I choose the wide sky and the man who shows it to me. No rings, no hurried vows, just words spoken plain, binding deeper than any paper. Spring advanced. 8 riders crested the valley rim together. 4 warriors, 4 women, watching buffalo grass ripple silver under wind. Below, their camp smoked peacefully beside water, no longer bound by ice. They had come as strangers, fleeing different hunters. They remained as a family forged in the hardest fire the frontier could offer. The right to choose their own ground and stand on it together. The West took much, but that day it gave something back. The snow has melted, the chains are broken, and 8 wounded souls have chosen to stand together on land that finally feels like home. Not because they had to, but because they wanted to. In a frontier that took everything, they found the rarest prize, the freedom to choose their own family. What about you? Would you have stayed in that thawing valley, building a new life with people who shared your scars? Or would you have ridden away when the first chance came? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I truly want to hear them. Thank you for riding through this winter with me. If this story moved you even a little, share it with someone who needs a reminder that courage and truth can still win. See you in the next tale. Stay.